It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And that means some smart talk radio is in your future. And this segment... Boy, an extraordinary story indeed. The work is called 7 Days to Live, framed for murder, 21 years on death row for a crime I did not commit, by Nick Yarris. We're going to be talking to him. He was on FBI's most wanted list. He shared a cell with Ted Bundy. He was on death row for 21 years until DNA, fortunately, proved him innocent. Absolutely an amazing story. Indeed, lots of issues here, lots of things to talk about. We're very happy to have him. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Good morning. I really appreciate this, Warner. This means so much to me. I'm actually glad we caught each other because I just got back from a European trip. I was speaking, and it's nice that I guess in the end the reward that I keep getting is that I haven't become embittered for what has been done to me, and people are responding to that.
Well, that's great. That's one of the issues we wanted to talk about. But let's do this. Let's set this up, Nick, if we can, for our Lewis at Large listeners. Give us a little bit about your childhood, which certainly had a lot to do with who you are and who you were. And let's get to the point where you are suddenly on death row, and then we'll take it from there.
Of course. So I grew up in Philadelphia, and in 1968, not only was America torn apart by the assassination of Martin Luther King, but my personal world was torn apart when I was assaulted by a man in my neighborhood who beat my head in with a rock after sexually assaulting me. And I did the worst of all things. I kept it a secret, and I went through a period of total change, being a right-handed person to a left-handed person, having to wear eyeglasses, living in terror that the attacker would come and get me again. And I fell prey to not only being a person sharing a secret with him, but I started to use drugs to hide from my shame and anger and frustrations. And I totally ruined my life. By the time I was 17, I was a methamphetamine addict, and I used to shoot drugs in my arm and steal things from people's cars. I was a mess. I was arrested in the city of Chester of 1981 while in a stolen car and high on drugs. The patrolman pulled me from the car and assaulted me, and he actually reached for his gun, and when he did, it went off. He then falsified charges against me and charged me with attempted murder and kidnapping of him, and said that I, instead of just stopping for the traffic incident, had attacked him and tried to murder him. I went to prison charged with all of these crimes, and I just fell upon myself, and I went through cold turkey drug withdrawals. It was a terrible time, and it was 4 days before Christmas 1981, and that's how I started to get involved in being the suspect in murder, because I stupidly told the police I might know something about a crime in the area involving a woman named Linda Craig. Miss Craig was abducted from the state of Delaware, driven into Pennsylvania, and murdered on December 15th, 1981. 5 days before I was ever arrested on the new charges that they had for me. The police found out I was a liar, and they put a prisoner in the cell next to me, and he said I confessed to him of the rape and murder of Mrs. Craig. And that was the whole undoing of it all, and began my ordeal.
Nick, why would this cop trump these charges up on you? What do you think his motivation was?
Well, we wouldn't know this until later, but Officer Benjamin Wright would later be fired from the force of Chester, Pennsylvania, 6 years after the incident. He ended up working with the drug gang, getting other people's drugs and getting people to sell it for him. He wasn't a nice person. He fabricated the charges because when he stopped me, I didn't respond to him. I just sat frozen in the car. The damage done to my childhood left me with a brain disorder called aphasia, and in times of extreme stress, I would shut down. I couldn't respond to him. He ripped me out of the car, and he put his forearm against my throat and started choking me, and I resisted. And when we started tussling, he pulled a stick out, and when I grabbed the end of the stick, I popped it right out of his hand, and he couldn't believe it. He was a 6'4", 260-pound man. And for me to do that to him really made him enraged, and that's when he grabbed his gun, and with both hands and my head down, I just grabbed his wrist, and that's when the gun went off into the ground, and I started yelling, okay. He put the gun to my throat, put me in the car, and even composed himself before he got on the radio, pretending that the incident was still going.
What about the prisoner? Well, again, I suppose any behavior in prison is either understandable, excusable, or inexcusable, however you care to look at it. But why would the guy in the cell next to you lie?
No, because a man named Charles Catalino burglarized the district attorney's house in Delaware County. They wanted to have me as the suspect. When they found out I was lying, they turned to me and said, Nick, we know why you did this murder. And I was incredulous. I said, what do you mean? They said, you killed Mrs. Craig because you had a breakup with your girlfriend and you felt sorrow after that, so you went out and killed her because she looked like your girlfriend. And when I balked at their idea that I would confess, they put me back in the prison, and they put a man in the cell next to me for one night, Charles Catalino. But we now found out later he was given special deals to go into the cell and pretend that I had fabricated the story to him, and that, confessed to him, and that I was expected to go ahead and have this elaborate story to him verified by him so that they could charge me with the rape and murder of Mrs. Craig. He was given no time for burglarizing the prosecutor's home. He was given special visitations with his girlfriend in the detective's office. And it was only after the DNA came out that we would learn the truth of all what was done.
If you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, of course, of Lewis at Large Radio. In this segment, we're talking to Nick Yarris, author of 7 Days to Live. Nick spent 21 years on death row for a crime he did not commit. He was later exonerated as a result of DNA evidence. Nick, let's take it up right there. Tell us, what part did DNA play in you being exonerated for all this? Tell us about that sequence.
Oh, that was a long ordeal. You have to remember, I was the first prisoner in America to be granted the request for DNA testing in February of 1988. And shamefully, they tried to murder me. They destroyed evidence, and when new evidence was uncovered, they destroyed that as well. It went on and on and on, and it tested my will to live, so much so that it was only because I wrote a letter to the federal court asking to be executed for a crime I didn't commit, because I was dying of an illness in prison, that the DNA was finally ordered by the federal courts in America, and I got the DNA results proving my innocence in 2003. It wouldn't be another 8 months before they let me go because they were so afraid of me because I had escaped.
What, Nick, again, what did the DNA evidence show?
The first round of DNA showed that the killer's gloves left the crime scene inside the car with the doors locked and the lights on were DNA from unknown male number 1. In July of 2003, further DNA results from unknown male number 1 were found in sperm and under the victim's fingernails where she fought with her attacker. There was second DNA unknown male number 2, which also did not match me, and sperm found in the victim's underwear. No biological material matched me, but they have 2 complete profiles of unknown male 1 and 2, and all that was in the evidence that would show that they were the attacker.
So without the DNA, basically Nick Yarris is executed sometime a while back. Is that correct?
Oh, easily, because I had 105 years plus the death penalty, and I survived ordeals in prison that I shouldn't have survived. Like I said, Warner, they made me sick with hepatitis C. They beat me so bad for escape that they broke some of my teeth. When I went to the dentist, he didn't care to change the suction return sleeve. And he infected us with a very viral strain of hepatitis C. And I listened to a man named Dale Carter, D.C., he was a nice guy, die in agony in the vents underneath me in Greene County Prison, Pennsylvania. And I decided to sign up for the medical treatments, and they injected me with all these drugs, and they blinded me. And I was horrified. I felt like I'd worked so hard to make a nice person of myself, and they're going to kill me in illness. So I decided I was going to die, and I was going to die as a dignified person, quoting beautiful words to them as I left, showing them that I had cheated them of the person I first was when I entered prison.
Did you, through all this, I'm curious as to your attorney, somebody convinced a jury somewhere that Nick Yarris is a bad guy. He killed or tried to kill and a whole lot of other things, and you end up with a really nasty prison sentence, and ultimately a sentence that would ultimately could have taken your life. Was it the same legal team that was able to get you exonerated as a result of the DNA, or a lot of things passed in that time?
Well, I initially was represented by one attorney, and I was acquitted of all of the charges against my arresting officer, Benjamin Wright, by the way. The jury only took 20 minutes to find me not guilty of attempted murder and kidnapping of that police officer. He was lying, and they knew it. And then I went to trial, and I only had a 3-day murder trial in 1982 for capital murder with the same attorney, and I only was able to pay him $1,500 for both representations. I had no resources. I'm just a kid from Philly who was a drug addict, and my father raised 6 kids. And so I was trounced in the worst way because I was seen as a psychologically twisted murderer. So everyone took their shots at me, whether it was a prison guard, prison inmate, or the staff that laughed at me while a metal object would be sticking from my body from someone stabbing me. So I learned the word deference on a very keen level.
What about, as you look back on all of this, I mean, gosh, this is just obviously it's a mess. It's an indictment of a lot of things, but what sort of, I guess, if there's such a thing as an order of what went wrong, the police action, the legal system, the prison system, tell us if there's such a thing as in an order, where would you start in terms of trying to clean things up?
My own actions. I bear responsibility for putting myself in the eye of the storm, and I can never step away from that. I will work and live the rest of my life trying to be a good person for that. If I can make the positive change in myself, maybe that will help others. I can't go around banishing others and degrading others and making others feel like the whole system is rotten. It is not. There are so many wonderful prison staff who help me educate myself and help me grow. How can I tear down something I love? I love the people who cared for me even at times when they hurt me because I learned the difference between my ego and my will.
What about, what are you doing? And again, you've written the book, obviously, and that will get the story out. Are you doing any speaking, or do you meet with young people, or do you meet with school systems or other groups or organizations?
Yeah, great point. I just came back from speaking in schools in the United Kingdom and in Belgium. I just got done speaking at Loyola University, San Diego School of Law, and many other schools here in California where I now live. It is my hope only to do one thing that I really am passionate about, and that's sharing how my education is the only thing that brought me back from mayhem. And if I can get young people who are struggling right now in their lives to take their education seriously, then I have achieved my goal with my book. I'm grateful that so many young students come to my website on Facebook or Twitter, and they respond to my speaking. They show the efforts that I'm making because it is truly what they need.
What about members of your family? What kind of sort of reconciliation tell us about the level of importance and relevance in your life today?
There's a video on YouTube called "My Mother Believed in Me" while I was on death row. Here's a woman who wasn't well educated who fought the system for her son because she was sitting with me at the time of the murder, having dinner with me. No mother should experience what my poor mother did. She died of Alzheimer's illness, and she fell down a flight of steps a few years back. But in her life, she taught me grace because she explained to me when I got out, she said, "Nikki, no one will know what you went through. The only thing you could do is smile at people and show them that you're willing to try." And I have.
Nick, what about, and again, we're with Nick Yarris, has penned an extraordinary story of his experience of 21 years on death row for a crime he did not commit, later exonerated as a result of DNA testing and evidence. He was also went through an incredibly difficult time while in prison. He served time on the FBI's most wanted list. He is now out and sharing his story, not bitterly, but with real frankness and candidness. Nick, I'm curious as to, do people approach you still as tainted goods, or do they see you as a man that has truly been wronged with a story to tell?
It's one of those fascinations to the word deference again. People who recognize the horror that I experience believe only in their own measure of their own mind what it must mean to them if they had experienced it. So a lot of times people talk to me with deference, believing that I am somehow damaged for what has been done to me, regardless of my extraordinary feats and things that I've done in 10 years of freedom. And I like to think that what I've learned is it's not the perspective of anyone else. It's the perspective of those who love and know me that really matters. My wife and I just got married in January of this year. I have a very productive life, and if that isn't the measure to them to show that I am not damaged, then I don't know what is, sir.
What is your, again, I think we can guess here, but Nick, when you talk to people, and I'm assuming, again, like you referenced, you spend a lot of time talking to younger people, what is the thrust of the message?
I never lie to them. I look them in the face and say to them, you're about to have some really horrible things done to you in life. And the only thing that's going to make you able to handle it is the education you give yourself so you can help your mother deal with dying, help your father who's struggling, or be that person that everyone else needs. And they seem to respond to that because young people are dismissed as a whole, as a group in our society so often that they're the most forgiving group, the most understanding. I've learned so much from the students that I keep getting wowed again and again by every effort I make.
What about, where do you sort of go from here? It's 2015, basically. What does the future hold for you, and what would you like to do?
Well, right now, we are developing my first book, 7 Days to Live, into a major motion picture. I'm on my way to a meeting today, actually. It's a nice feeling that the art industry of Los Angeles has opened its arms to me. I have a great opportunity here to go forward and do a lot of speaking at schools throughout the United States, and I want to try and help end the death penalty because it belittles us all to kill other human beings. I've learned the folly of the justice system is this. Everybody who wants something from it forgets that it was set up so that we'd stop killing others. We created the penal system and imprisoning people so we'd stop executing everyone because every crime used to be punishable by death.
What about, again, pretty soon you're going to be, so who do you want to play you in a movie star? What movie star do you want to play you?
Well, I'd like to see a younger actor like Charlie Hunnam have the role because it's such a great character stretch to go through that much of an ordeal. I mean, as someone who's written the story and someone who's been part of the professional team that wrote the script for it, I've recognized that it's going to be a true test emotionally for an actor. Someone's really going to be hurt and deeply moved by this, and I actually feel pity for the actor who has to portray this role for what they're going to know about life.
Yeah. What about, have you had any exposure in any way or contact in any way, shape, or form with any of the people that, in essence, wronged you over the course of your life, whether it was outside those prison walls or inside?
Of course. And I've done the right thing. I remember... you see, I escaped in 1985, and in 1986, 1 year and 1 day to the event, I was attacked by 4 officers wearing riot shields with their face covered. And they beat me for 4 minutes. On my last day in prison, they botched my release, and I had to go back to this room. I know it's a long, drawn-out story, but all of the prison staff came and shook my hand that was on shift to say that they had respected me for how I carried myself and such. And one man revealed the fact that he was one of the 4 men who beat me, and he apologized. And I hugged him. I gave him a hug, and I said, it don't matter. Just make sure you can never forget to hug your children tonight. Yeah. And he was hurt by it. He cried.
Do you think, do you feel better, again, it has been a little while here, but do you feel better about the United States penal system overall, worse, or what? I mean, again, I
am so proud of the many. Listen, you have to understand, we only get news that is relevant to good or bad, and sadly, so much of it is negative. But so many good people work in this system. I'm so proud of the police officers that work for us that every day I try and thank them because I recognize that might be the difference in the treatment they give others. We have to recognize that we have to be all in. We have to make the system better. If we complain about it and tear it down, we only make it to shreds. I've been in parts of the world where you'd never want to go into the justice system because it is a mockery compared to what we hold as a standard. And what we hold as a standard is flawed only by the individual ruining it for himself. Texas just put a man who was a prosecutor in prison. Pennsylvania just put a judge in prison for 28 years. These are things that are going to show that we will win as long as we continue to be all in. That's it. We have no chance. Warner, we have to stick to it.
Well, Nick, wow, what a story. Again, the work is called 7 Days to Live, Framed for Murder, 21 years on death row for a crime I did not commit. It has been written with tremendous candor by Nick Yarris. And Nick, again, when you talked about a movie, first of all, let's do this. How can our listeners find out more about your story and also get a copy of the book?
Oh, yeah, my website is nickjyarris.net. Yarris is the correct spelling, my last name. Yeah, you can find me. I have copies I'll send from my home here in Los Angeles. I also am excited about my chances at a big film festival next year, and I'm not allowed to speak about it, but I got a film already finished, and I will be out with it next year. It is a documentary, and it is a theatrical release, which is a really good opportunity for another platform to go and speak to young people. So, again, Mr. Lewis, I've done like you. I've taken my education and I've reached out to the people who are willing to listen to me in the hopes that the things we both say have meaning to their lives.
Well, again, Nick Yarris, thank you so much. We'll look forward to that motion picture, look forward to the film, and thanks again so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.